All right, so welcome. Today we are going to talk about aspects in planetary relationality. So last time we talked about planets and dignity, and we're kind of learning different pieces so that we can eventually dive in and talk about election astrology or how to pick a good transit to start something in your life. I feel like that's one of the greatest tools that astrology has to offer, and I really want to empower all of you to be able to use that in your own lives so that you can, kind of surf the cosmic waves or choose the best weather to do things in your life to kind of match that energy, to make things a little easier, because we all need that right now. All right, so we're going to talk about some details about what aspects mean. We're going to talk about the kind of the 5 major aspects, plus a few other important chart patterns that I think are good to identify. We'll look at some chart examples for those major patterns, and then we'll talk about the monthly weather. So what are aspects? So when we're thinking about planets, we can think of them kind of like people. They have their own needs, their own responsibilities, and they don't always get along with everyone. Some people we like better than others, and that's okay. But it's good to know that, and it's good to know how different relationships between patterns can color significations. So when you're getting into astrology, you're like, oh, my Mercury's in Virgo. What does that mean? And you can look at all those significations on all the different websites and books. But if that's, say, square Saturn or conjunct Venus, that will change what you read in that book, because no planet lives in a vacuum. The sky's always moving, all the planets are always moving, so planets are always in relationship with each other, and that's important to know and identify. When looking at planetary affinity, or who they like to hang out with, 3 things you want to keep in mind are, well, first of all, you want to think about the signs that they're in. And then the 3 things are the 3 different aspects that make up the meanings of a sign. So polarity, classically called masculine and feminine, but more modernly we think of in terms of like yin or yang. So a more yin sign would be the earth and water elements, whereas that more dynamic yang sign would be fire or air element. Modality is a cardinal, fixed, or mutable, or the element. Are they in fire, earth, water, or air? And those different affinities will create the relationships between the planets based on what sign they're in. In Hellenistic astrology, or more traditional astrology, they had their own theories about vision, and that's where a lot of the aspects come from. It's kind of a mashup between those more traditional visionary theories of how vision worked, and and excuse me, my voice is a little off today, and different geometry, different polygons that you could make in the chart through angles and geometry and math. So we'll need a little of that today too. And then you also want to think about, do the aspects and the sign compatibility or incompatibility help or hinder the planet from being able to do that job? So thinking about what I said earlier, maybe Venus conjunct Mercury, maybe that's helpful, but maybe a Saturn aspect would be a little bit more of a hindrance, or something you would need to work on in order to really bring through that planet's significations. All right, so then kind of like I said earlier, think about your chart and think about if you have a tendency towards a certain type of pattern. Sometimes you look at a chart and it's like full of oppositions, or there's a ton of trines there. And so just kind of think about that, because that gives a flavor to your chart and gives an important energy significance to your personal challenges or dynamics or things that you need to work on or that you can take for granted in your chart. So we're going to be talking about the co-presence and conjunction, opposition, square, trine, sextile, and then aversion, inconjunct, quincunx, that's all the same thing. So we're going to talk about that. And then the special configurations that I wanted to address today are the Yod, the T-square, the Grand Cross, and the Grand Trine. All right. So first, we're going to talk about the difference between a sign-based aspect and a degree-based aspect. So anytime a planet moves into a sign that has an affinity with another sign that a planet's in, then that is a sign-based aspect. So this would be a square. You have Mars in Aries and you have Jupiter in Cancer. So we're not going to think about dignity or anything like that right now. We're just going to look at the angle. So it's at a 90-degree angle, the sign. So even though Mars would be at 2 degrees Aries and Jupiter being 22 degrees Cancer, you would consider this a sign-based aspect. So I wouldn't use this in a natal chart necessarily. I would use this more in like mundane astrology or kind of day-to-day thinking about the energy of planets. So as soon as the planet ingresses into another sign, you can kind of feel that. And as that planet is maybe going closer, getting closer to an aspect, so as Mars, because it moves faster. Yeah, it moves faster than Jupiter. It would be coming up on Jupiter to create an angle. So as that exact degree-based sign becomes more intense, you'll feel that personally. But in a natal chart, we're going to talk about orbs and more degree-based aspects. So yeah, a degree-based aspect would be the planets are not only in those signs that are at, say, for a square and 90-degree angle, but an exact degree-based aspect as well. All right, so I mentioned orbs earlier, and what that just means is how many degrees it would be for an aspect to count. So for sign-based, obviously there's a little bit of affinity there, but for electional astrology and natal astrology, you want a closer orb. So if you Google this, people have lots of takes. Different schools of astrology have really strong feelings about orbs, and you know, that's great. People can do what they want, but I think it's better to keep it a little simpler. So I like to think about the 10, 6, 3, and exact. So 10 degrees, that's like the outer. It's a little different with luminaries, we'll talk about that. But 10 degrees, okay, that's like, you know, that's starting to get there. 6 degrees, yeah, I would definitely pay attention to that. 3 degrees, absolutely. Exact, absolutely. So if you look at your chart, the tighter or the closer the degree of the aspect is, the more important or the more influential that aspect will have on your life. Let's see, so the sun is a little different, as it always is. It's our big luminary, gives life on this planet. So it takes up a little bit more space. So, and when planets are conjunct or becoming conjunct to the sun, it's something a little bit special. Within 15 degrees, it's called under the beams. So the light takes on so much space in the sky. Even if you look at it, it's like huge, that a planet gets obscured by the brightness and the light of the sun. And then within 8 degrees, it's even more obscured. You can't see it really at all, and that's called combust. So the planet, it's interesting in a person's chart, you might not be able to see it, but it'll take up a lot of a person's mental space. And then if it's within 1 degree of the sun, it's called a cazimi, and that means that it's sitting on the throne of the sun. So that planet kind of becomes merged with the sun and becomes extremely significant in a chart. So if anybody has a cazimi, in their chart. We will look at that. Yeah, so just think about it, the tighter the orb, the more intense the aspect. All right, so co-presence and conjunction are kind of a sliding scale. So co-presence is when two planets are in the same sign, and conjunct is, you know, as we're talking about, getting to be that exact degree. This doesn't really have an inherent malefic or benefic nature. It blends the significations of the two planets, and it can be positive or negative depending on the planets involved. So in the houses that the planets rule become related. So here we have an example of Mars and Venus conjunct in Taurus. So, you know, people that have this, it's tends to be very charismatic because you have all of the like vitality of Mars and the beauty and allure of Venus. So people that have this tend to, you know, attract a lot of attention, a lot of partners, but, you know, it's not inherently stable. So, you know, it might just be about that energy and not necessarily about maybe building a long-term relationship. But that's an example of how the two planet significations can be blended together. And one thing I forgot to mention, we're going to be going through the aspects in order of intensity. So conjunctions are the most intense, followed by opposition, square, trine, sextile. So how intense that aspect is, or the kind of the amount of weight you would pay to it. So opposition, this would be two planets opposite each other. That's an easy one to remember. And this has the nature of Saturn. So malefic natures of planets are amplified, benefic natures of a planet gets kind of diminished or stepped on. And the two planets, you can think of them as kind of in an ongoing argument. So they're adversarial, they both want their way, they're pulling in either direction, and it's up to the individual that has this in their chart to try and mediate and find the middle ground and find how to, I almost think of like the Chariot tarot card with the horses kind of going in two different directions, and you need to kind of take the reins and try and pull them together so that you can go in a straight line or achieve your goals. And so a malefic nature, but as anyone who's been with me before, I kind of like malefics. I think that they can be constructive and helpful. And so if you have a lot of oppositions, you know, that just means you're going to grow into your chart a little bit more, and you're going to find a way to harness that power. There's a lot of activity here and a lot of energy here. And you know, if you could get Saturn and Mars to cooperate, that's like a lot of juice in your chart to achieve your goals.
Well, you can have all my oppositions, Megan.
Oh, do you have a lot of them?
You can have them.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say one more thing with the Mars and Venus. They are 1 degree apart in the 7th house of Gemini.
Oh, wow.
And it's been very interesting. Mm-hmm. But I'll wait till you're done with your lecture.
Yeah, we can go over it for sure. Take a look at that. Yeah, so yeah, oppositions can be a little tough, but when you can find that balance, there's a lot of gold there. And as Saturn likes to do, it likes to make you kind of earn your reward. So the next one is a square. And so these are like Hellenistic, I forget the exact term, but these are like major aspects that in Hellenistic astrology they were really into. And in Hellenistic astrology, they'd be part of a larger polygon. So you can see it most with the square. If there was 2 other ones here, it would create a square. So this is just kind of one angle of that square. And you'll see it more when we talk about the Grand Cross that actually looks like a square. So these are planets at 90 degrees. This aspect is the nature of Mars, so lots of activity. It's challenging, but really powerful. And again, this one, even so, this one's not inherently positive or negative either, which you would think of being the nature of Mars, that it would be more of a malefic. And I think it gets the reputation of being malefic because it is a little challenging, but it's just really active. If you had benefics here, it'd be active in a positive way. It's just like a lot of activity in these two planets or these two houses. It's like an internal tension or struggle, and just like you need to do something with this energy. It's not going to just stay still. So I think I've talked before a lot about kind of the hero's journey. So that's like becoming a hero through friction or trial or tribulation. So people with a lot of squares kind of have that. This is another chart to kind of grow into. You need to determine which planet has the upper hand, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes, because that is important and will change the coloring or signification of that angle. But so the way I like to think about it, so they're the same modality. So for example, we have Mars in Sagittarius and Mercury in Virgo. So those are both immutable signs. I think it's easy if you think about two signs that were in cardinal signs, like if this was in Capricorn and Libra, cardinal signs like to be in charge. So those two signs are arguing about how to be in charge. They're immutable, they're arguing about how to kind of change and adapt. It's like, no, I want to do this in the Sag way. No, I want to do this in the Virgo way. Both have really strong ideas about how to do that part of the process. And that's kind of a way to think about what they're arguing about. But when they can, again, same with the opposition, once you can get them on the same page, like you are going for it. There's a lot of energy there. All right. So yeah, so I just mentioned how to figure out which planet is kind of like winning the exchange. So it's called Planetary Dominion. And it only really matters in squares, trines, and sextiles. And you don't like this gets into the nitty gritty, things that I'm really obsessed with, but you don't have to pay attention to at this stage. But things you want to look forward, dignity, which we talked about last time, whether it's applying or separating. So the faster moving planet that's upcoming on the slower moving planet, that one that's applying or coming up to the aspect, that's the more important planet. And there's also something called the right or left-sided doctrine, which is just a fancy way of saying which planet is in the earlier sign. So the order of the zodiac stays the same. We go from Aries to Taurus to Gemini to Cancer, so on and so forth. But you don't have to start in Aries. You could start anywhere. We could start in Libra or let's say Sagittarius, but the order is always the same. It's Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, Pisces, and then we start over again. We're always going in that order. So the planet that is in the earlier part of that order is the one that like wins the exchange. So here in this square, we have Mars that's in the earlier sign. So this one's dominating Jupiter. So because it's Mars, it's dominating, that's like a malefic. So it wouldn't be as helpful as say if these were reversed and we had Jupiter dominating Mars, and that would maybe, alleviate some of Mars's more malefic nature. Does that make sense? I know it can get a little confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Sorry, go ahead. No.
Oh no, that was it.
Okay. Thank you. So that's just something to think about. And if you do have a malefic or benefic involved, then sect comes into play. It's important to know which one is, the more malefic or benefic player in your chart. And so that goes back to essential dignity, and you can see how it all gets related, and so why it's good to learn these things in steps. All right, so now we move on to Trine. Trine is ruled by Jupiter. Yay, that's something that we like. Generally considered positive, amplifies benefics. They like to be in flow, which is what the Trine is about. Tempers the nature of malefics, so the malefic won't be as detrimental, say if it was the dominating one in a square. And the Trine's like, chill out, we're all here, we're all in the same element, let's like relax and work together. So malefics will be more of a team player and be more constructive. Natives that have a lot of Trines can maybe sometimes take for granted their talents. They'll be like, everyone's really good at speaking, or everyone can write like this. And it's like, no, that's like a talent that you have. Not everyone can do that. So sometimes people that have a lot of Trines kind of overlook their gifts and they kind of take them for granted and maybe don't feel as compelled to use them as, say, someone that's earned it through rectifying an opposition or a square. So that's something to keep in mind. Like, something I like to talk about a lot in chart readings are soft skills. So like, say someone had a trine between their sun and moon, like the ability to know your emotions and maybe have some charisma from that, that's a soft skill. It's a huge advantage. So, or here we have Jupiter trine the sun. That's like, you are going to be popular, people are going to like you. That's a huge advantage, even though it's a soft skill. So I think it's important to start utilizing these things, or identifying them so you can utilize them. And you know, if I get to the interview stage of a job interview, like I got this on lockdown. So maybe it's not your writing skills that are so huge, so you get a little help with that, because you know if you get to that stage, you're gonna be fine. So it's good to use kind of an objective lens when looking at your chart so you can identify these things and leverage that, because anything to get you a leg up in the world. What else we got here? Sextile. So the sextile is the nature of Venus. So that's the lesser benefic. So it's not quite as benefic as the trine, which everything's in flow. The sextile, the planets that are an aspect of the same polarity. So here we have Venus in Taurus and the moon in Cancer. And so both of them are in that yin sign. So they still have things to talk about. And the sextile, it's kind of an opportunity for creativity, an opportunity for cooperation. It's there, but you do need to engage in this aspect. You need to intentionally use it. Like oppositions, squares, they're happening to you, whether you like it or not. Sometimes you probably wish you could choose to engage in that one. Whereas the sextile, it's like you need to make that happen. And that even is the case in day-to-day, like daily transits. When a sextile happens in the sky, it's an opportunity. So it would be like, for example, your friend was like, oh, I heard about this job opening. Like, you have to apply to it. It's not just going to happen to you. Or like, you are looking for a car and you happen to see like a great one on Facebook or something. Like, you have to engage with that, but the sextile will help like lubricate that interaction so that it's easier and you maybe get more of what you want. So yeah, I think of it more socially in charts too. It's like people that have a lot of sextiles, they could like maybe interact with people really well, or when they like turn on the charm, they kind of can get what they want. So it's an opportunity. All right. So then aversion, inconjunct, quincunx. So I don't do a ton with like there's a lot of aspects that you can do out there. And I know people get really into them, like semi-square, all of that. I feel like there's a lot of complication in a chart without getting to there. And I'm like, I can't do that. That's too much. But if you're really into those, that's great. feel free to chime in and talk about them. But the one that I do, so this is 150 degrees, and this is a more modern aspect, but I think that this is important as well because it's what you don't see in your chart. So with those other aspects that we talked about earlier, those planets can all see each other. And these are houses, even by sign-based aspect, where planets can't see each other. And I think it's important to know that. So it can be difficult to blend these areas of the life. So let's take a look. So we have Moon in Gemini, and we have Saturn in Scorpio. So those don't have element, modality, polarity, none of that in common. So they don't really interact with each other. But it's important to know if your planets can't see each other. So in this case, maybe it's helpful because it's a malefic. But what if it was like Venus? So your emotions and your ability to be romantic and attract beauty and be creative can see each other. So that's good to know. Maybe you need to like force those two to play together. Set up play dates for your Moon and Venus. And even it's important, sometimes the Moon needs a little limiting. If the emotions are out of control, you need some of that like Saturnian sedating. Okay, let's like create a plan to work on this. And if that doesn't happen, that's good to know, because then you as a human with free will need to intentionally try and tap into these areas that don't really see each other or have difficulty relating to each other. You need to intentionally try and bring them together and create harmony. So, look at your chart. So you can even look at the houses. So it's like, oh yeah, these two houses are like so unrelated, but maybe that's a disconnect and you're feeling frustrated by that. So just try and kind of get to know if these two parts of your chart are emphasized but unconnected. How could you rectify that? Right. Okay, so any questions before we move on to the different major chart patterns? No. Okay. Oh, was that someone?
I know this is it just depends on the situation, but with Chiron, I guess maybe if it's not, it just depends on where it is and what it's doing with any planet, really. But I find that's one, it's not a planet, it's a meteor or something. What is it?
Yeah, I mean, I use it all the time. That's one of my like major things that I always look at. So I would definitely look at that in aspect or conjunct or opposite or anything like that. I think that really shades the significance of a planet. I think asteroid might be a minor planet. I don't know.
Asteroid, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's very important. And if it's square something or I look at a lot
opposition.
All of those I think are important. And like the nodes, the angles, like you can use the aspects for all of these. As we'll see with some of the patterns that we're looking at, I definitely look at not just the major planets when considering these different chart significations as well, for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, the only caveat to that is fixed stars I only look at in conjunction. I wouldn't do like a trine or square with that. But any like asteroid, minor planet, angle, node, fixed point, something like that, I would do all the aspects with. All right, so a yod. Yods are controversial. Some people are like, this is made up and stupid. Some people are like, this is the only thing that matters. So as always, I like to try and find a middle ground between the two of them. People call it the finger of God, which I'm not really sure where that comes from, but just to show that it kind of implies like a something that you need to fill out. So kind of like something that's moving through you almost, that you are embodying. It can be kind of tough because we've got aversions going on. So definitely an aspect to grow into. And it's two planets that are sextile, and then both of them are in conjunct another one. So it creates an isosceles triangle. It's it's interesting. So let's look at the chart example I have for this. I don't know if you guys are, I'm sure you guys know Dave Chappelle. So he is a really interesting Yod. So I don't know if you remember his story. He had the Chappelle show, very successful. And then in the third season, he walked away from a $50 million contract, went to Africa, was like, I can't deal with like the Hollywood pressure, kind of they're making my art into something that I don't want it to be. He would often say that he didn't feel like he was in control of the humor, and he felt like he was the butt of the joke, not creating the joke. So it fell out of his control. So I think his yacht is super interesting. So the bottom parts that are in sextile, we have Pluto in the second house of money. So it's like power dynamics, Pluto, struggles for control in the money house. We have Neptune in the fourth house. That's like the disillusion of your foundation. You don't feel home in your home. So he would say that he didn't feel at home in America. And then the top of it, the part that we're pressuring towards, or that the yacht is kind of looking towards, the planet under a lot of pressure, is Mars in the ninth house, which is kind of your ethics, your higher ideals. And with Mars there, he was kind of combative. He was combating the establishment. He was like, my ideals don't match yours, so I'm walking away. I'm separating myself from this. So that was like huge. And he's made a comeback, which is great, but it's been on his terms and good for him. But that's a great example of how a yod will play out in someone's life. And how it can use outer aspects. It doesn't have to be the traditional planets, it can be anything. Oh, and then the other thing that's super interesting. So when this was happening in 2004, 2005, his south node was in Taurus. So the south node was activating the top of his yod. And the south node is like separating, letting go. So a lot of interesting astrology at play there. All right, the next one we have a grand trine. So these are all the same element, like a lot of flow. So it's really funny if you like look up. So I was trying to like look through kind of famous people to find good examples, and like so many famous people have grand trines, like so many. If you look in the chart, I think it's like Astro-chart, and it's like there's literally like famous people. Look up by like chart signature, and there was like thousands for grand trine. So that just goes to show that people that have this have special talents or areas in their life that are in flow. So there's like a lot of talent, but whether you can harness that or not is something else. You can take it for granted, but just like so much creativity. All these parts are in flow. It's like feels nice, very Jupiterian.
Megan, real quick,
Sure.
my daughter has a grand trine
Mm-hmm.
in water. And so it makes her very creative and even spiritual. But I'm telling you, it's like literally like it's not, I mean, it just depends on the person and other things going on, but she does not really like to engage, especially in anything spiritual. But she has a natural, strong psychic ability. But she, I mean, she's not very spiritual per se. And I just think that's interesting. I looked at her chart and I was like, but Zoe, like she'll dream about something and it'll happen. It actually runs in my family. Mm-hmm. I'm the same way. My mother, and it goes back generations. Mm-hmm. So I was just, I can't, it's not my place to kind of make her go in that direction, even though I see it. And I think that's a tough thing when you're reading people's chart, where you tell them, this is a really good thing. And they're like, maybe when she gets older, I don't know.
Yeah, it depends on her age for sure. It could depend on the planets involved, the houses involved. Spirituality can be kind of scary, So if there's a lot of ungroundedness there, maybe giving tools to kind of ground so that she can take that and maybe not feel as like carried away. I know that can be something with people that have water trines. They feel like the currents are just carrying them. So you could take a look at the planets involved in the houses and maybe try and give her some tools to deal with all of that, or channel all of that creativity and spirituality in a way that feels maybe safe to her.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
so that's just, one thing to look at for sure. Thank you for sharing that. One of the example I have for Grand Trine, I don't know if you know who Edna St. Vincent Millay is. She is a poet, and she was like probably one of the most well-known poets at the time, probably one of the most well-known female poets still. And she was like a superstar back in the day. She was like one of the original party girls, but she won like Pulitzer Prizes too. And she has a fire trine, and the houses are interesting. It's like the social houses. We got 11, 7, and 3. And she had a really complicated love life. She was bisexual, polyamorous. At the time, that was very scandalous. And a lot of her poetry was very like about relationships and moving. So speaking of Chiron, kind of bringing that melancholy for relationships, but in a beautiful way. Very talented. Like I said, won multiple Pulitzer Prizes, things like that, had a huge following. So just like so much creativity. And then interesting with Mercury conjunct ascendant, kind of being known for her words. Yes. And then next we have a T-square. So the only difference between this and a cardinal cross is that it's missing one leg in the polarity, or not polarity, the modality. So this is kind of similar to the inconjunct or quincunx. I can never pronounce it, which is why I say inconjunct. Is that what's missing is just as important as what's there. So with the T-square, people who have this are looking for that completion or that stability of that missing fourth leg. So it's like a dynamic tension, can again, internal drive to achieve, to do things. When there are transits to the missing leg, that can be really significant for a person. The moon each month, but any major planetary transits, it could either help them feel more stable and complete, or it could highlight the missing part of the missing leg and be distressing, kind of depending on what's going on in the chart and the transit and the person. They can also attract partners that have aspects in that missing leg, kind of looking for that outside stability, which is always a little dangerous, but can work depending on what's going on. But definitely highly dynamic, huge output, like squares get stuff done. So looking at Britney Spears, free Britney. And I don't always count the nodes because like I think that's different, but she does have another planet there. She's got a Venus there, and I just think it's really, I like really think Britney's chart's so interesting, so I did it anyway. So in her first house we have this Pluto Ceres conjunction, which is part of the T-square. Pluto power dynamics, and it's almost like bringing that power struggle of like Hades, Demeter. Like, is she Persephone in this story? I don't know, but I feel like Britney's story brings so many archetypes out, and that's why people get so invested. And it's so interesting that her missing leg is her 7th house, because she has all these really intense relationships, and I keep wondering if that's her attempt to find stability with Kevin, and then she had that 48-hour marriage that her father made her annul. Like, she keeps trying to find stability through relationships, and it's that empty leg, which just is really interesting. And down here with the South Node and her Venus, I just can't help but feel, and it's in Capricorn, so there's some isolation there. And is that like her being isolated from her children? Like, and she's got this moon in the 5th house. So I don't know. They're just like, oh, her chart, her story. But the good news is that her North Node is in the 10th house. So kind of bringing her out of the darkness, hopefully into the public eye in her own terms. We looked at her chart when we were doing the moon phases, and she is moving into a more active and open part of her progressed moon phase. So I'm hopeful that she will get the freedom that she deserves. But yeah, interesting chart.
Is that because her Pluto is like, because Pluto could mean well, it's transformation, but it could mean like, depending on its placement, it could mean some level of isolation sometimes.
Yeah.
Does she often feel isolated? And well, usually celebrities do anyway, so.
Right. Well, I don't know if you've been following the Free Britney stuff that's been going on lately and all the testimony coming out. They've done some like really messed up stuff to her. And like, for example, she would make a friend and they would go into her phone and like change all the numbers. So she'd think that she'd be texting her friend and they wouldn't text her back. She didn't know that like her handlers changed her numbers, like things like that to intentionally make her feel isolated. And we also have Saturn right here as well, which could represent the father. So the father with the Pluto there, it's like the father control issues. So, and like she said, when she went into the conservatorship, she would do it if like her father wasn't in charge, but they didn't listen to her. So just like definitely the isolation, definitely the taking away of autonomy. But I hope that it turns into like a positive, affirmative transformation story. But Pluto can also be about those power struggles, which I just see playing out so much right now. But I'm hoping that there's that rise from the Phoenix rising from the ashes moment for her.
Although Megan, they're saying too, it's not so much there's other people involved besides her father. It's like her whole business,
right? Like Blue
partnership.
Taylor, sister.
Yeah.
But her father was definitely like very involved.
Oh yes, he was. Yeah, he was one of the big.
So yeah, interesting. And interesting about the empty relationships looking for that stability. So that's that attempt to kind of complete the cardinal cross, which we're about to talk about. You see a lot with people at the T-square. So again, that empty spot is just as important as the full houses or full aspects. Speaking of, we have the Grand Cross. So this is like super powerful, even like in day-to-day life when this happens in the sky, like everyone's freaking out because it's just like a really powerful aspect. All these squares, all these oppositions, all, creating this dynamic tension in the sky. So if you capture that in a person's chart, like they are getting stuff done. There's this like internal drive to just do everything. People that have it are, oh, sorry, what was that?
Excuse me. So yesterday there was a Grand Cross. There was a Grand Cross yesterday. One of the astrologers was saying if a baby had been born, because we had the sun in Leo, the moon in Scorpio, and then we had what else did she say? Trying to think.
Then it would probably be the Jupiter and Aquarius.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And then, yeah, I guess it's a little far from the orb, what I would say would count, because you do have Uranus in Taurus, but it's at 14 and everything's kind of at the end. So I would say that's probably more of a T-square, or how I would count it, but you could definitely look at that.
From yesterday though, she said if a child had been born, a baby had been born yesterday, she was explaining. I'm not gonna say who she is. I know you probably know who she is though.
No. I mean, sure, like definitely.
Deborah Silverman.
I don't know her.
Okay.
But yeah, and I mean, it's like not a super tight orb, I would say, for this Grand Cross. I think definitely like maybe next year or the year after when we have Uranus and later Taurus and Saturn and later Aquarius, when the sun goes into Leo again, I think that's going to be like a little intense
And
because
I wish Uranus would just like leave Taurus because it's been like crazy for me. You know that.
yeah, my first house is in Gemini, so I'm not like super excited about it going into my first house. So, you know, I think it's all things are what they are. So, will the planets keep turning? But yes, if there is a grand cross in the sky, you can definitely feel it. I mean, even a loose orb one, I feel like everyone's been feeling this week. So, sure, we could say that was like a little grand cross. I look at tighter orbs in terms of ones in the sky that I would maybe count more, but every astrologer is different, and there's a million different opinions about orbs and things like that, kind of like what I said at the beginning. So if you find that something works better for you, totally fine. These are just kind of how I do it, and take that as one of many opinions and then come to your own conclusions. But things that are done with a grand cross, there's a lot of endurance, like extreme internal drive. Like people put output. It's just like a lot, like getting stuff done. A lot of energy. So I thought a really interesting example of this is Miles Davis. He not only has a grand cross, but he also has a trine. And I just thought that was like so interesting because, like, I mean, 5-decade career, pioneered different genres, names synonymous with jazz. Like, could you think of like a better aspect example than like a trine and a grand cross? Like, all the talent, but all that internal drive to experiment, to do different things. He has this quote, like, I'll play it and tell you what it is later, because he's just like creating amazing music. So, and apparently, like, he has a really intense personality, which people with grand crosses can have, because it's like kind of a no nonsense aspect. Like, the intensity inside them bubbles out. So maybe not like the most warmest and fuzziest people, but like, does that matter when you are like creating jazz? Like, I don't think so. So it's just like so much activity in this chart, and it's really interesting when you have like a grand cross, like that gets activated all the time. Like, it's like any time a planet goes into a fixed sign for him, but it could be immutable or grand, it's activating your whole grand cross. And if someone has this in their chart, it's like one of the things you want to look at. But he's also interesting because we have the trine as well. So we have that creative talent plus this drive to implement your mark on the world or do things, and you get someone that makes great things and pioneers great, amazing things. So yeah, so it's really interesting. So if you have it in your chart, I expect great things from you. Or I'm sure you're already in the middle of it, and I would love to see what it is. Any questions before we go on to upcoming transits, etc.? And we'll look at your charts in just a few minutes so we can see what's going on there. So we have our second Aquarius full moon coming up. So that doesn't happen very often. Last full moon was in 1 degree Aquarius, and this next one is 29 degrees Aquarius. So look at the Aquarius part of your chart because that is getting activated. We have Saturn there. Jupiter just went back there. This is the second full moon there. Like, it is the universe is trying to tell you something about that part of your chart. So I would listen, see what it has to say. I think it will feel nice to have things move into Virgo, although it will still be trining Uranus, but we'll get like a little stability, hopefully. But at this point, who knows? Like, what is stability in, post apocalyptic world? We've got a lot of ingresses over the next month. Mercury is like whipping through signs because we're going to get a retrograde in September. Venus is also going fairly quickly, but again, because we're going to get a retrograde in December. So before a planet slows down, usually they like whip through signs. So yeah, so we'll enjoy Venus and Libra while we have it before it moves into Scorpio. So yeah, and then it'll be, I think every astrologer is like a little worried for when Mars moves into Scorpio, because it will be opposed Saturn or opposed Uranus and creating a T-square with Saturn. So, let's just, again, even though Mars is in its detriment in Libra, let's just enjoy it while we have it before it moves into Scorpio. And then, yeah, the upcoming retrograde goes into its pre-shadow on September 7th, and then it'll go full retrograde September 28th. So that's just good to know that that's coming up. It feels like a while since we've had a retrograde for some reason.
What's that retrograde again?
Oh, Mercury.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, for some reason it feels like a while since we've had one, but I don't know if it's just because like time has no meaning right now, but it's coming. So, and it'll be in Libra. So look at that Libran part of your chart. See if you have any Libran planets. Those will be affected by this retrograde, and Mars is going to be it will be in Libra during this as well. So the Libra part of your chart is like going to get hit a little bit.
So Megan, this moon that's going to be at 29 degrees in Aquarius, it's going to bring to culmination what occurred, like as far as when it was only 1 degree Aquarius.
I think it's like a continuation of that story. But I think that you also have to take into consideration Jupiter going back in since the last one that we had, and that Saturn is still there. So I think that the Aquarius story is kind of maybe started at the end of 2020, and those tendrils are kind of still with us. Like, as we're still processing everything that happened, maybe those things that happened at the end of last year, maybe you didn't fully deal with it. Maybe you were gonna do something and then life got in the way, and it's kind of being like, remember me. But I don't think this is a new story. I think that this is a continuation of a story that has been a little bit ongoing, and it's being highlighted right now.
Okay. Because isn't it like Saturn and Uranus, like it's like a power play going on too?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. That's why I think all astrologers are a little nervous for when Mars goes into Scorpio, because that'll be opposite Uranus and square Saturn. And it's like, everyone's been like, yikes. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of astrologers have their eye on that time period, which will be, I think, in like October, November. So there's like an eclipse in there too. So it's just,
And then so the nodes, it goes into Taurus and Scorpio, the nodes, right? After
January, I think.
January?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that this eclipse in
Sagittarius?
yeah, I think it's late November. I don't have the exact details. I can look it up though. I think that's going to be like a little like preview of what the story is going to be in starting with the new node. So like I think the eclipse is in a moon in, let me look it up. I think the eclipse is going to be in Scorpio. So I think it's going to be a little preview of what the next nodal story is going to be. Sorry, I have like a million things open on my laptop.
And when you were talking, like before, you said You said 2021. We thought 2020 was bad. Wait until 2021. I remember you saying that.
Yeah, I think I said it was like Uranus enters the chat. It's going to be just like a little different. And 2022 is like a similar story to 2021. Yeah, so the eclipse is November 19th. Oh, and it's a full moon in Taurus. So that Taurus Scorpio axis is going to be hit. And so I think this is going to be a little bit of what's to come with the next nodal story. You often get that when an eclipse happens, and it's like there's like a little overlap. So I think that's going to happen. So pay attention.
So it's going to be lunar?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Of course. All right. So yeah, so the fall is gonna be wild. So enjoy. So then these are upcoming transits. You can take a screenshot if you want. Yeah, I think it's just gonna be like depending on what planets you have activated, how it's gonna be. Some things that I highlighted: Mercury conjunct Mars. Is that happening soon? What date are we? Okay, yeah, so that's in the next few days. So it's always just, oh my gosh, what did I hit? Go away. Okay. It's always just like be careful when Mercury and Mars get together because you could say things that you don't mean. So during those days, I'd maybe like take a breath before you engage, unless you want to just go like full destruction, then perfect time to do that. But you know, just be careful of like your tone of like your word choice a little bit. So just like take a deep breath. If you feel the anger bubbling up, maybe it's a conversation best had in like a little bit and not right then. And then we have the Sun in Virgo squaring the nodes. I think this is important if you've had a significant nodal story for this cycle. If not, you probably won't feel that too much. And then always when Mars and Pluto get together, there's just something to keep an eye on. It'll be interesting to see what happens then. And then, yeah. And so then at the end of September, we've got Venus and Scorpio opposing Uranus. And I know Venus isn't Mars, but I'm just going to pay attention those days to see if like what the headlines are for when Mars goes in the next month or so. And then again, Mars trining Saturn. Just Mars, why? Mars likes to activate things, so just keep these dates in mind. And yes, I think that is it. If you want to send me some money for doing this, it helps me keep everything running. That is my Venmo, Sky Above Astrology. And other than that, any other questions before we dive into looking at your charts?
Megan, you don't have PayPal? Do you have PayPal?
I do have PayPal.
That's what I was going to ask if there's some other way.
Yeah. My PayPal is just my name. Oh. Yeah, I think my PayPal. Yeah, I will. My PayPal is at Megan McGonigal. I will write that in the chat.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to stop recording and then we can look at some of your charts and see what your aspects are. I didn't stop everything. No, okay. I don't know why I'm having trouble with technology today. All right, let me, oh, did I stop recording? No, okay, that's why. There we go.